Welcome into another edition of the Throwing Chairs podcast. It has been a rough couple weeks for the Indiana Hoosiers, to put it lightly. So we're going to have a lot to talk about here in this new episode of TCP. I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest, Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano. Guys, again, we're going to get into how this week has been for Indiana and, again, how the last couple games have really been for the Hoosiers here in just a little bit. But we will start this episode like we do every episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast with our icebreaker of the day. And this one's going to go a little bit on a deeper level on how you really were as a kid growing up. What did you want to be whenever you grew up? If it isn't already what you're on track to be.
It kind of is on track, just a different kind of field. I don't know why, but I had the biggest hyperfixation in weather. So I wanted to be like a meteorologist on like TV or something.
You and Cruz would get along so well.
I had just I think for my free time, like after school, I would go on, like my parents and I would watch like the Weather Channel. It was so fun for no reason. So
I love that.
Not my dream field of work anymore, because that's a lot of science and math. That's just not in my path, I guess, or just not in my ability.
Well,
Thomas,
if we see you on the Weather Channel in a couple of years, I'll remember
You
this
will
conversation. I don't know. I mean, at one point when I was a kid, it was 100% to be a professional athlete, whether that was a soccer player or a basketball
that kind of went out everybody's door very early on.
Like you said, that obviously didn't pan out super well. But I don't know. After that, I to this day, I don't entirely know what I want to do, but I definitely had visions of being a basketball reporter, and that is exactly what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. So that is very cool to come full circle on. I'll say I probably am doing that.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to you, Thomas. I always wanted to be an Indiana Hoosier whenever I grew up. I am a Hoosier in some aspect, but I'm not on the team, and they don't want me on the team. Doesn't matter how bad Indiana's playing right now. I'd make it 10 times worse. I
honestly don't know about that, but continue.
Yeah, I definitely would, especially if he gave me any minutes. There'd be a lot of bricks out there. There was one part whenever I was growing up where I wanted to be an astronomer at one point. And again, like you, Audrey, I realized there was way too much math that was involved with that. And that went out the window so quickly. I'm still like fascinated with like space and everything. Especially I cannot wait for the solar eclipse that's coming to Bloomington here. I believe it's in April.
They're canceling classes for it. It's crazy.
I've heard there's well over 500,000 people coming to Bloomington.
Yeah, I mean, Bloomington is in literally the direct path of totality. So it's going to probably, you're probably not even going to be able to walk around.
So obviously, I don't think you guys would have been anywhere near there was a solar eclipse that happened. Man, this would have been probably 6 or 7 years ago by now.
It was 2017.
Probably longer.
It was 2017.
Okay. Yeah,
I remember because I lived in Virginia. We weren't under the direct path, but it was kind of like in a weird time where I don't know what time it was in my life, but my mom and I, we used like an Applejack cereal box, and we made our own
glasses.
Yeah, we made our own glasses, and
That's
I have
great.
a picture, but we were just looking up, and it was not successful, but we tried. It was the thought that counted.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love space too. I love the eclipses and all that. And my local gas station down on 9th Street or whatever, they're selling
the
glasses.
glasses. Yeah, I gotta get them. They're gonna because those if you really want to see the eclipse, you have to get those before they sell out, because they will sell out quickly, and then they will jack those prices up. I mean, I remember in 2017 when, again, I was from an area where, again, it's probably how you guys were, Audrey, where you weren't in the path of totality, but it was still good enough to where you could get a decent glimpse at it if you had the right equipment. But obviously we did not. I can't wait for April. April's going to have a lot of really good things. We got the eclipse. We've got the little 500. It's going to be a great time in Bloomington. But at this current time for Indiana men's basketball fans, it's not a good time to be a fan of the Hoosiers. They have just been horrendous, to put it lightly, as of recent. They're now on a 3-game losing streak and a 3-game losing streak in this current time and a 3-game losing streak in Assembly Hall. They've lost 3 straight, that being the Penn State, Northwestern, and Nebraska, where they trailed those 3 teams by at least 16-plus points in each of those contests in the second half. And, of course, they've gotten blown out just about in each one of them. They fought back in Northwestern. But yeah, I mean, starting off with that Northwestern game, guys, I know it's already been nearly a week removed from that game, but we haven't talked about it here on the podcast just yet. The Hoosiers lost that one 76-72. Just you two were there in the building. I was not, and I was kind of enjoying myself elsewhere to a certain extent. But let's just look back to that game and just get your all's general thoughts on how the Hoosiers played.
Yeah, I mean, that was another tough game. We had hopes of it going better than it did, as we do for most of the games that have happened this season. And, once again, we were disappointed. But it's just kind of how the season has gone. It was just unfortunately, another quote-unquote normal game for the Hoosiers. Northwestern had control for majority of that game. They played well. The Hoosiers did not. Northwestern came into that game ranked 290th in offensive rebound percentage. They ended up grabbing 14 offensive rebounds, which were huge for them. They converted that to 12 second chance points. Foul trouble hurt the Hoosiers. Renew had a poor performance. Woodson let us hear about that after. I'm sure he let Renew hear about that after. He ended up fouling out. Cups also fouled out that game. I thought Khalil Ware had a solid game that game. He finished with 22, 10 of 14 shooting. One of the few bright spots for Indiana, 16 rebounds in 36 minutes. And then Mbako, he had a career-high 20, 19 coming in the second half. Very impressive second half from Mbako. And then Galloway, a career-high 12 assists. Other than those few shining bright spots, it was really Northwestern this entire way, and Woodson falls to 0-4 against Northwestern in his coaching career.
Yeah, I mean, I think these 2 games have been a very big deciding factor. And not a deciding factor, but really just a tell of how Indiana's season has been. I mean, you could look at Northwestern and you can compare that to how Indiana plays in spurts and plays in halves, and that second half was definitely better for Indiana. But I mean, it was they were both just games, I think especially in Nebraska, that really, really just hurt the program overall. I mean, especially, we were talking about it in our discussion, Hayden, that Nebraska game. I mean, the press conference, it was the most emotional.
Yes.
It was the tipping point. And if Indiana doesn't turn it around after this, I don't know where you can even go from here as a program. And there's not much else you can say because, I mean, they're having the same consistent issues every game. They're not able to turn anything around. They're not able to fix anything. Even if you have an 8-day break, they don't have anything coming out of their back pocket. They're doing everything the same way. And it's not turning out well for them. And this team right now, in this given moment, is not a team that they want to be. And I mean, obviously Hoosier fans aren't happy, but you have to think about the team. They are probably the most angry, the most frustrated, the most just overall deflated and defeated that they have probably ever been, I think.
You're exactly right, Audrey. I mean, coming down the stretch, especially, they know exactly where they are in the rankings, and they know their shots of not even just an NCAA tournament berth, which is not going to happen in any stretch of the imagination at this point in time. I mean, they're not even going to make the NIT at this point. They're not even a bubble team in the NIT. And I've even heard the CBI isn't even considering Indiana.
I think they just got placed in the last 4 out.
That's crazy. It's not like this is an Indiana team that doesn't have the talent, that doesn't have shooting. They don't have size down low. They don't have the guys that can play on the defensive end and give those second efforts. But they just haven't been able to culminate that into a whole season. They've been able to do it in spurts, like you said, Audrey, but they haven't been able to continuously do that game after game after game, or at least see that in spurts throughout each of these games. They're starting to lose gas down the stretch because they know where they are. They know the season's just about over. I mean, again, it's really been a very struggling time to be an Indiana Hoosier. And I mean, we just briefly mentioned the Nebraska game. I mean, that's probably they showed those spurts once again there to start off the second half, but once again they just weren't able to get the job done. What'd you all see in Nebraska?
What's frustrating is there's like no signs of improvement really in any aspect of anything. The free throw shooting continues to, I don't even want to say get worse because it's gotten
worse.
Yeah, 60%
it's not getting
worse.
Better.
Yeah, it's not getting better. 100% it's not getting better. The last two games were their 8th and 9th games, shooting 60% or worse from the free throw line. Last game, largely from Khalil Ware. He was 5 of 13. He was visibly frustrated on the court. He couldn't get them to fall down. The three-point shooting, that's another topic of conversation. 4 for 21 in this last game. I mean, that's just terrible. And the streakiness is unbelievable. I tweeted last game that the only consistent thing about this team is how streaky they are, and I stand by that 1,000%. I've felt this way for, quite frankly, months, and every single game, it just seems like it's the same thing over and over. They're down by 22, somehow come all the way back and bring it to within 3, and it's like we're watching a completely new game. And then they lose by 15, all in the same 20 minutes. How is that even possible? And you know that like this is their most recent game, and for fans listening, I could be describing a game from 2 months ago. Nothing has changed. Certainly, nothing has changed for the better. And yeah, like you guys mentioned, it's at this point it's super evident. In the post game press conferences, last game. Like you guys said, Galloway and Mbako, specifically Galloway, that was the most draining and emotional we have seen him. It was quite frankly uncomfortable. You feel for the team, and I'm sure we'll get to this in a little bit, but Woodson has a lot to do with it, and there doesn't seem to be really any accountability, at least in my opinion. But again, I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this game also just brought to light all of their consistency issues. I mean, I need to check this first half. Overall, Nebraska got 14 three-pointers. Start with there. 14 three-pointers with 4 of them coming from Keisei Tominaga, who had 20 points. I mean, that was a bright spot. He had 18 in the first half, yeah. So, but hold on, let me find this stat. I mean, you cannot let this many three-pointers get away from you. And I mean, they got lucky. It could have been a lot worse because, I mean, even Nebraska didn't perform well from the 3-point line. Oh my gosh, from the free throw line. But
we have to shout out Jamar Lawrence real quick. He was 5 of 5 from 3 off the bench.
He
played a phenomenal game, 19 points. I mean, 3 of their starters had 18, 15, and 20, and then 19 off the bench. I mean, they just killed the Hoosiers. They controlled every aspect of the game. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. You can't let that happen to you on your home court. I mean, you are in Assembly Hall, one of the biggest venues in college basketball, and Indiana is known to be a blue blood, essentially. And you're getting blown out on your home court. You're letting 14 three-pointers get away from you, and 4 players get double-digit points. I mean, that's just unacceptable on your home court overall. It's unacceptable really overall, but to be doing that as a college basketball school, essentially. I mean, these games are just it's the same thing where no one is connected, essentially. So they're all kind of just playing the only way that they want to, essentially. And like Trey Galloway said in that blowout loss at home against Penn State, they aren't all 5 as 1 on the court. And it still hasn't changed however many games later.
I want to address 2 things here. The first one is going to be if you all remember last season, whenever Indiana in January, I believe it was the 3-game losing streak that they went on, and then they had a players-only meeting led by guys like Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson. We haven't seen that this year from the Hoosiers, or at least we haven't heard about any player-only meeting or anybody, like you said, Thomas, taking accountability for Indiana's actions here down the stretch. That clearly screams that this Indiana team has been sorely missing leadership presence out there. Again, and Mike Woodson has said it, and I'm not denying it, Indiana is definitely a very, very young team, especially without Xavier Johnson. Yeah, you've got some of those pieces that are older, but by and large, this is a very young team. So, of course, you're not really going to have some of those leaders out there. But that's been very concerning that you don't have anybody that's out there on the floor that can kind of slow this team down and get everybody back on the right track. We've seen it in spurts from guys like Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal at times, but really, by and large, the entire season, we have not seen that. The other thing is, and I completely understand why the fans were booing against Nebraska in Assembly Hall, because, I mean, honestly, this team has not played well. I mean, they honestly have every right to start booing that team. But whenever you boo a player that is still shooting at the free throw line, that is on the team that you are supposedly cheering for, that's not going to make things better. I understand the Hoosiers were terrible from the free throw line. They were 14 of 24 against Nebraska. But that's not going to help. I loved it whenever they started cheering on, I believe it was Khalil Ware after he missed one free throw, got down on himself, got both hands on his knees, just was all lumped over. You could tell he was frustrated with himself. And you heard the fans start cheering him, try and get him a little bit more amped up and just tell him, hey, you're okay, knock in this next one and you'll be just fine. But then you start booing them. That's just not going to make things better.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I get you do make the time out of your day to go to a basketball game, but you can't go there if you're not going to essentially support them, honestly. Just that's not going to make things any better. You're going to put them into more of a hole at that point. And, I mean, Trey Galloway said, I mean, it's part of it, but still, you can't. Again, home court, essentially. It's your home court. You can't let that happen to you.
You're just fueling Nebraska.
You're
it's
fueling
almost
Nebraska.
becoming a disadvantage for the Hoosiers to play at Assembly Hall.
Because
the fans are just
chance in the middle of the game. It's
the fans are just turning on Indiana, which, again, it has been a very, very rough season for Indiana, and not the season that a lot of people would have expected, especially coming out of the Trace Jackson-Davis era, where Indiana has been very good. But again, like you said, I mean, that's just not going to make things better.
Yeah, you're essentially knocking them while they're down. I mean, you get a turnover, and then you see Indiana just walking back to the other side of the court with their heads down, and you're booing them as they're doing it. I mean, do you not think that that's almost making it for Nebraska? You're not going to want to play in front of them, one, and you're almost giving Nebraska the advantage, being like, it's almost like Nebraska's on their home court at that point. I mean, I'm
going to go sit on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, if you're not going to really just be there to try and pull Indiana out of these holes and maybe try to get Indiana back in the game, then don't go.
Yeah,
honestly.
or just head home or something.
Take the time out. I mean, Assembly Hall is filling up still at these points at this point of the season when they're 14 and 12, and on a 3-game losing streak at home. But you're just almost going to be negative. You're only
it
going
would be a
to
better
just knock
message
them all
for those
down.
seats to be empty, and they're like, wow, like our fans are not showing up at this point, versus them being filled and then turned into boos and them dragging them down. I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, and that just kind of goes into, I mean, that's one of Indiana's biggest downfalls, is letting these other opponents get into runs. And when they're getting into runs and they keep on making these mistakes, then they're booing their own players on their home court. That just fuels the fire for their opponents.
Yeah, again, like we've said, it's been a very rough season for Indiana, and to really show for that, the Hoosiers have dropped to a KenPom rating of 104. That is the worst rating that they have had in 14 years, ever since the 2009-2010 season. Guys, this was a historically bad Indiana team that I very much voided from my memory. I wasn't that old, but I still remember it. This Indiana team went 10 in 21. Some notable names on the team: a sophomore, Verdell Jones; a freshman, Christian Wadford; Maurice Creek; Jeremiah Rivers; a freshman, Jordan Holes; Tom Pritchard. This was not a good team, and it was still a team trying to recover from the sanctions that were put on them post Kelvin Sampson era. It was only Tom Crean's second year. Guys, Mike Woodson has said it's totally reasonable that he does not care about rankings. He doesn't care about ratings. He doesn't care about some of these other statistics that either media or people like the KenPom site put out. But you can't deny that this is bad, and he can ignore it all he wants. But the fact is, at the end of the day, this is exactly what the tournament and what the selection committee will look at to determine if you are going to make the NCAA tournament or not. So you can ignore it all you want, but the fact remains, it is still a very bad time in Indiana basketball.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff has happened in this season, and it could be seen as a rebuilding year, but you can't rebuild if you're not connected and you're not rebuilding from losses and you're not bouncing back from losses. You're just kind of digging yourself into a deeper hole at that point. I mean, it's just the record. They're still in the plus range of their overall record, but their play doesn't really show that. And I mean, it's obvious they're going to have to win out these last couple games. I mean, they said it before Nebraska, you're going to have to win out the last couple of games. But
when did you start saying they were must-win games, Thomas?
Weeks ago.
Start of 2024?
Yeah, months ago.
But yeah, so, I mean, you never know. You really never know. I mean, they could go into the tournament and be a completely new team, into the Big Ten tournament and be a completely new team. Who knows? Win the tournament and get into the NCAA tournament. But right now, if they continue playing the way they're playing, they're going to be a team that is playing on the first day of the Big Ten tournament and will essentially possibly not even make it far in the Big Ten tournament and not even make it into the NIT or CBI at this point. So it's just, they need to really, the same problems that they just haven't really looked at themselves in the mirror, and they just need to bounce back and essentially just look at themselves and get connected at this point. I think that's their biggest problem.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this next bulletin you got. Injuries have plagued them, but is that the main reason they've played so bad? I don't think so. They've had injuries from start of the season up until right now. And
Xavier Johnson, Khalil Ware, Malik Renew, Kai Newton, obviously.
And they've had kind of more than enough time to adjust. They've played ample games with those injuries, and it's the same results. And with the injuries being said, as many games that they've had those injuries, they've had plenty healthy. And it's kind of the same thing. And I saw this video on Twitter, and I'm going to talk about Woodson now for a minute. I'm someone who is a fan of Coach Woodson and
of course
believes what he's putting out for this team. But the lack of accountability and the number of excuses is shocking. It's honestly shocking. He'll blame the injuries, which, like you said, is a valid excuse.
Factor, yeah.
But still, until what point?
At this point.
And then he'll talk about Xavier Johnson. Maybe I'll specify on him and his injury. There's been a couple games where he came back from injury, and then by Woodson's decision, he'll bench him. And I think it was warranted. X had...
He wasn't playing well.
It wasn't playing well, to say the least. But still, that was Woodson's decision. And it's what's the excuse there? And then beyond that, it's we got to keep working. Cups mentioned after Northwestern, he said, we have to stop digging such big holes and then crawling back at the end of the games. And then they did that against Nebraska. They dug a really big hole, but they didn't come back at the end of the game. Yeah. They came back midway through the second, which was great. And then they still somehow blew another 15-point gap. And it's just... hearing Woodson say, we're young, or injuries, we got to keep working for basically the entire season. It's almost like he's reading a script. I don't even know if he believes...
ever since Auburn.
Yeah.
I think.
It's I don't even know if he believes what he's saying or if he's just going through the motions to answer the media's questions, but they're not even. It feels like he's script reading. It doesn't feel like they're actual answers because these are the answers we got months ago, and it's the same results, and they're extremely poor results, and fans are obviously increasingly getting more frustrating. And I don't know when something will change because these are games they have to and can win, and they're quite frankly getting blown out at home.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been really struggling for Indiana to get things on track, and it did not help that right before the Nebraska game, Indiana lost out on one of their biggest recruits they have been going after for not just months, but the past year or 2 years. They lost out officially on Derek Queen that chose the Maryland Terrapins over the Indiana Hoosiers, and now Mike Woodson is 5 of 54 in recruiting top 80 recruits. Guys, to put that into perspective, in 4 years, Archie Miller was 5 of 55 in recruiting top 80 recruits. It's safe to say, and especially at this current point in the recruiting aspect of recruiting high school players, that path is essentially gone for Indiana because it's way too late in that all the top guys are basically gone unless you can go after some hidden gems. All that's gone, and all Indiana has to show for it at this current point is Liam McNeely, who will again be huge for Indiana if he at least stays committed to the Hoosiers. So Indiana's really going to have their work cut out for them this offseason. Going into the transfer portal is just going to be absolutely massive for them to try and rebuild this team because, again, you got to look at the roster and think of who is staying, who is going. Some people that can still stay is Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, Trey Galloway's got another year. Khalil Ware, I highly doubt will be back. If he knows what's good for him, he can go straight to the NBA immediately if he stays on this current path. CJ Gunn can stay, Caleb Banks can stay. I believe Peyton Sparks has one more year, Gabe Cupps, and then Anthony Leal also has another year of eligibility, and then Ja'Kai Newton on top of that. There's a lot of guys that will probably leave after this season is concluded, so it's safe to say this not getting Derek Queen was a huge hit to Indiana.
Yeah, I think I do think it would definitely be a big hit, but I think with the factor if Malik Renew stays, it won't be as big of a loss as people are assuming it will be. I think I agree with you. I think Khalil Ware will definitely be making his way into the draft. But
Renew can slide to the 5.
Renew will slide to the 5, I think. If Mackenzie Mbako stays, I know they were just talking about exploring him moving to the 4. You never know. I think especially the transfer portal will be a big factor. You were talking about, just overall recruiting, top 80 recruits. He has been focusing on that, I think, a lot. But it's almost at this point where I think a lot of other people have brought this up is that go after the people that maybe have more of a heart for this Indiana team and more of a heart for the sport of college basketball. I think it's really just those kinds of players will be those leaders that Indiana desperately needs right now. And people that really care about the game and not really, I'm not saying that any of these players only care about themselves, but it's almost at that point where some of these top 80 recruits or even higher are just focused on moving into the draft.
That's what you get with those players.
What Indiana needs is a player that cares about the sport of college basketball and cares about how the team is performing on the court. And Indiana does have those teams right now because Indiana is one of the biggest. Indiana is college basketball, essentially. The state of Indiana is college basketball. So Indiana needs to represent that. So I think right now with Mike Woodson coming in, him and his staff have been very focused on getting those high-level recruits, which is important. Not to say that it isn't. It is very important, and they do have Liam McNeely in that now, and they got Mackenzie Mbako in that last season. But I really think you should start really looking for those recruits that really focus on the sport and not just themselves and getting into the draft.
They've swung big and missed big here, especially as of recent, Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought Audrey hit the nail right on the head. It's a bummer. I don't think it's the end of the world like some I've seen some people on Twitter reacting, but I do think it's a bummer for sure. This was one of the two big guys that Woodson was going after, the first obviously being McNeely. And yeah, they've been looking at this guy for months. And there's been some speculation of him going to Maryland and, skip ahead a couple months, and here we are, and he does go to Maryland. And, Indiana has kind of their hands empty besides McNeely, and it's a bummer. Especially because they were teammates at Montverde, and that connection coming into next year would be there, and McNeely would be coming in not only with a close friend, but someone he has that chemistry with, and I don't know. It's definitely a bummer, but I thought Audrey hit the nail on the head. Look at those transfer portal guys. Look at the guys who are in love with the game of basketball, and see what they can do from there. Because the high school recruits, it looks like they're out of luck.
Yeah, and kind of almost going off of that, I mean, Derek Queen, a big part of why he chose Maryland as well was to stay close to home.
Exactly.
And I think while Indiana and their staff are really focused on getting those in-state recruits, I mean, I think they almost need to try a little bit harder.
They don't have a lot to show for it, honestly.
They really don't have a lot at all. Really, in the starting lineup, it's only Trey Galloway that's an Indiana native, I want to say. I think.
Yeah. In the starting lineup, I mean, you look up and down the roster of Indiana, the Indiana natives themselves is C.J. Gunn, Peyton Sparks, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, of course, and then Ian Stevens.
Yeah.
That's all they had to show for it.
I mean, if you can find a
Purdue
player...
is winning the battle.
Purdue is 100% winning the battle. If you can find someone that realizes that in 49 states it's just basketball, but in Indiana it's different, I really think that will really help Indiana kind of in the long run. That's what they need right now. And Derek Queen chose Maryland because he is a Maryland native as well. And Maryland essentially isn't having the best season, but they are as well building something. So I think he also wants to be a part of that. It would have been great to have Derek Queen and Liam McNeely, high school teammates like Malik Renew and Jalen Hood-Schifino. But, I mean, essentially, that's just not how you're going to win the battle if you're not really focused on getting the players that you really do need.
They need a guy like Trent Sicily. I've been saying this for months. Again, he still has one more year of high school left before he even thinks about making the next jump because he does not need to pull a Christian Lander. That clearly doesn't work out. They definitely need a guy like Trent Sicily, someone that, again, like you said, is from the state of Indiana, knows how the game is played, knows how Indiana basketball is supposed to be played. That's exactly the guy that they need to go after. Indiana will look to end this 3-game losing streak this weekend, actually tomorrow at the time that we're recording this on Saturday. Then they're going to be heading out to play the Penn State Nittany Lions at the Bryce Jordan Center. Guys, this is a Penn State team that looked like they were starting to go down the path that Indiana currently is going down, but they just turned another gear against the Illinois Fighting Illini in one of the craziest environments I've ever seen in college basketball. They played at the Rec Hall that they haven't played at in decades and pulled off a stunner against the 12th ranked Illinois Fighting Illini, winning that game 90-89 to go to 13-14 in their record. Guys, Indiana's looking to try and avoid their 4th straight loss against this Penn State team. What needs to happen in order for that not to happen? In order for Indiana to end that losing streak?
This is going to be probably one of their hardest games just yet. I think Penn State is coming off of...
Hungry.
They're very hungry, and that wasn't... Didn't they come off of a Rutgers win before they played Indiana?
They beat Rutgers 61-46, January 31st.
Yeah, with Penn State coming off of very big wins, they're a good team. So it is going to be a very, very tough game for Indiana. I think essentially it's the same thing that usually Indiana does need to do heading into games, which they essentially don't. They need to just really stick together, and they need to not let these opponents get on these runs and not let that affect them. They need to keep their composure, and they really just need to fight. They need to show some fight, I think, honestly. They don't have any left in them, essentially, with what you saw in Nebraska at the end of that game. And I think that they will have a better performance, because I do think after Nebraska, I don't think that they have seen a lower point than they did with their fans booing them out of their own court. It really, I mean, you look at all these games and you're like, what does Indiana need to do to bounce back? It's the same things, that they need to defend the perimeter, they need to make their free throws, they need to get those offensive boards, and
it's just a matter of
it's a matter of actually doing it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of actually doing it. So if they can, again, look at themselves in the mirror and bounce back and be a good Penn State team coming off of one of their, probably actually their biggest win this season. Easily their biggest win this season. Then it would be a good start to hopefully for them going on a good run in the tournament.
Yeah, Penn State, that was a super impressive win over Illinois. We actually got to catch the end of that and see the court rush, which was very cool.
Incredible.
And yeah, they are outperforming Indiana 100% at this moment in time. But I do want to point out the game before that Illinois game, they lost to Nebraska 68-49. They finished with 49 points on the game. And that's a number that stands out to me. That's a number that...
Granted, it was on the road, but still.
Yeah,
but still,
100%.
You score 49 points in a college basketball game. Something's not right.
Something's not right. Yeah, exactly. And you are right, though, that was on the road. And, I'm sure that would have looked differently if they were at home. But my point stands that this is a very, very beatable team nonetheless.
Oh, yeah.
The Hoosiers got a taste of them just over 2 weeks ago. They played... Penn State played here in Bloomington February 3rd. Hoosiers obviously lost that one by 14. They've lost a number of games this season by 14 plus. And yeah, that Penn State game from February 3rd, that was another one that we categorized as shocking. We had Durham on the podcast before that game, and we described it as it would be an inexcusable loss. A couple days later, they lose by 14, an inexcusable loss. Indiana, as we talked about this entire episode, they're coming off a couple inexcusable losses. And I don't think they have any more quote-unquote inexcusable losses because they're just that deep in the hole, but they have the tools they need to succeed. Like Audrey just said, it's a matter of if they will actually make that happen. We didn't touch on this, but they've done a fantastic job of getting to the free throw line. They just have to put them in the basket. Woodson said it all season long. They are free. A couple players have reiterated they are free. They understand that it's free. They just have to mentally and physically put the ball through the hole when the opportunity presents itself.
It's like it's that easy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. Whenever, I didn't play it for long, but whenever I played high school basketball, I only played it for 2 years because, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not an athletic specimen by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a cross-country runner and a golfer, if that tells you anything. But my high school basketball team was so bad at shooting free throws my freshman year, I believe, that our high school coach, shout out to Doc Nash, good luck this weekend, guys. Actually, tonight. Good luck tonight against the Salem Lions. Let's beat them. We were so bad at shooting free throws that he made us shoot underhanded for the rest of the year. Now, we only...
Whatever works. I mean, if they got in the hoop,
we practice underhanded... I don't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. This is great.
I'm just trying to make a point. But, yeah, we practiced them for like a week trying to shoot underhanded free throws. They're very, very difficult to pull off. I think it was Jerry West that did it. I'm going to get killed for getting that wrong. But yeah, we practiced that and then we actually did it in a game and people laughed at us for months.
Well,
so please continue.
Khalil Ware, if you are listening, just a thought.
He can reach out and just put it in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should try that too. Yeah.
Do what Shaq did in the All-Star game.
Tomorrow is another super winnable game. Yeah. Woodson said the other day in his Zoom press conference that he'd like to win out the rest of the season. That was when they had that was before the Nebraska game. So he is 0 for 1 in that situation. Tomorrow's his second opportunity to do that. And yeah, I'm not going to add too much. They know what they have to do to win. They just have to make it happen.
Get it done.
And I'll just leave it like that.
So we're going to get into our final two segments before we end things out here on TCP. Guys, we're going to get started with our player or players to watch for this weekend's game against the Penn State Nittany Lions. Audrey, I'll start with you.
I am going to go, I don't know, I was just kind of thinking about it. I'm going to go with Malik Renew. I think he's coming off of 2 games where he didn't play awful against Nebraska, but I think he probably could have played better. He didn't play a lot in
the second half either.
He didn't play a lot either. Compared to everybody else, he played 29 minutes. I mean, Trey Galloway played 39, Khalil Ware played 38, Mackenzie Mbako 38. I think, especially in his performance against Northwestern, this could be a very big bounce back game for him. And if Indiana wants to be successful, I think they're going to need it to be. So I think he will definitely bounce back. He'll probably look at these numbers of these last couple of games and know that he really does need to. So, yeah, Malik Renew is my player to watch.
Thomas.
I only have one as well. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Mbako.
Hayden's happy.
Mackenzie Mbako, Northwestern, we mentioned he had a career high 20, 19 of which stemmed from the second half. Very impressed with that second half against Northwestern. But beyond that, he had another career high last game. He had 22. So he's coming off back-to-back career high games. I thought he's been a bright spot in a very large moment of darkness for the team overall.
It seems like he's finally getting his confidence.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And it's nice to see, especially at the end of the season, heading towards the Big Ten tournament rather than it maybe being at the beginning of the season, him falling off or something like that. But, yeah, he's been impressive. I'm looking at him tomorrow. Honestly, like that. He's had a good week, and I'm assuming he's going to continue that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Mackenzie Mbako. Like you said, I mean, he's really been terrific here as of recent, at least these last 2 games. I mean, despite the losses, like you said, I mean, he's put up back-to-back 20-point performances. He had 13 points against Penn State whenever they played each other in early February here in Assembly Hall. Start off the game really hot like he usually does, but then after that just really didn't get a lot of touches, didn't really get a lot of shots up after that. But he's definitely a guy to watch out for, and especially against a Penn State team that can shoot the lights out any given night. They hit 12 threes against Indiana in their first meeting. They're going to need that kind of shooting with Mackenzie Mbako. And for our final segment, before we end things out here on TCP, we're going to give our predictions here. I'm going to go on ahead and start off here, and I'm also going to say I'm the only one that got close enough again in the score against Nebraska. I think I've been on a pretty good hot streak here as of recent. Not to toot my own horn, actually, I do.
Yeah, you are.
I'm gonna. Again, this is a must-win game for Indiana. Like we've said, I mean, they just have to stop the bleeding somehow against a Penn State team that's really starting to feel themselves here as of recent, playing really, really well against Illinois in their last game out. Again, they're once again without one of their best players, Kanye Clary, who had left the team, and he's no longer going to be with the Nittany Lions. But this is still a very good Penn State team, and that's why I'm going to pick the Nittany Lions to win this game, and Indiana drops their 4th straight, and I'm going to say Penn State 78-72.
You know, I was going to agree with you, Hayden, and now I'm just... There's an inkling in my mind. I'm going to keep the same score.
She's getting optimistic.
I am keeping the same score prediction that I had, but I think this Penn State team is very, very good, and they're coming off of, obviously, their best win of the season. But I think this is almost a win that they are coming off of, that your court gets stormed and everything.
It's going to be a hangover.
I think it might be a hangover game, and you might just come back and you beat the Hoosiers once before. You can do it again. I think Indiana is going to take advantage of that. And I think this will be Indiana's a big... I don't think it'll be their best performance on the road, but I think it'll be a big performance. Yeah. And I'm going to go with a game down to the wire. I'm going to go Indiana 70-68. I do think that Indiana will have just come back from this Nebraska loss and at least play a little bit better. I don't think this. I don't think that by far this will be Indiana's best performance, but like you both said, I mean, this is a winnable game, and you can win over Penn State. You can't let them get the season sweep. Nebraska already got the season sweep. Purdue got the season sweep. You need to bounce back, and this is a game that you need to do it on the road. So that's why I'm going with Indiana in a game down to the wire.
Thomas, end us out.
I do think that Indiana will stop the bleeding, but I don't think it will be tomorrow.
You guys are really bouncing off of each other.
That was a juke. Oh my! Wow, my ankles are gone. Get the ambulance out. My ankles are broken here.
I think they're capable of winning the game, and I hope they do. But I'm gonna repeat what I said I'm gonna go back a few weeks. I'm gonna repeat what I said against Ohio State. They haven't given us a reason to believe. They haven't proven anything. Penn State, on the other hand, has shown a reason that they can and will win tomorrow. I'm gonna say what I said against Ohio State. I hope they prove me wrong, but I have Penn State tomorrow, especially back at home. They beat Indiana a couple weeks ago, and Indiana a few days ago was the lowest that we've ever seen them on the season, at least, and that was 2 days ago. And now they're going, across the nation or across the.
It's a 10-hour drive.
Yeah, 10-hour drive.
Of course, they'll be flying.
Yeah, they'll be flying.
I wish.
10-hour drive for us if we were to be going, but that's not the case.
Thank the Lord.
I don't know. I'm not going to add too much to that. I think it'll be a close game. I agree with you both. I think both teams are very capable of winning, and it'll be a coin flip. But I think Penn State will take it. I'm going to go. A little bit more low scoring than you guys. I'm going to go 68-63 Penn State.
That's really creepy. I had that score in my mind when you were saying the score. That's crazy. We're on the same wavelength, but
I also have to say for Ohio State, I think that I was questioning you. I'm like, how could you possibly pick the Hoosiers? What reason have they given us? And then they won. So maybe we'll get some of that same luck. But I also have to say that was an 18-point comeback victory, one of the most impressive of the season.
No,
you guys were right in the first half.
Yeah. They got us in the first half.
We'll see. I'm sure they're going to get us in one of the halves tomorrow as well, as they usually do, but we'll see.
Well, before we end things out here, I do want to give a very special shout-out to the Indiana women's basketball team for knocking off the second-ranked Iowa Hawkeyes. Excuse me, fourth-ranked. Whoa, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Indiana, I got to say, what an environment in Assembly Hall. Easily the best environment all season long across both women's and men's. Guys, we got to talk about this very, very quickly. That was an incredible victory, a statement win for the Hoosiers here at home.
Yeah, I mean, I got the opportunity to go to that game, and the day before I was at the Nebraska game. I mean, if you talk about a just complete switch of an environment, I mean, I had been driving past Assembly Hall, I want to say it was at noon, and there were already 100 people lined up.
People
outside
were
of
all the way
Hall.
out to Bart Kaufman.
By 2 hours before the game, 3 hours before the game.
That's insane.
That is huge for the sport of women's basketball. I think both. I mean, you can't say it's the I mean, you can. Okay, I'm not going to say it's the Caitlin Clark effect, but
we won't get into that.
I think that especially Caitlin Clark has definitely been just overall growing the sport of college basketball and women's. But I mean, Indiana is really just building themselves a program, and I think this win, coming off of the Illinois win, I mean, it was massive. So I think just that game was just huge for the sport overall.
Yeah, that was awesome. I didn't have the pleasure of seeing them in person, but I certainly followed the game. What a win for the Hoosiers. I don't follow the team as much as I should, but I know that they needed the win, and they got it in spectacular fashion. 17-point win over the fourth best team in the country. What a performance by everybody. It's a real team effort. Terry Moore is doing such a fantastic job with that team, and it's just honestly really great for Hoosier Nation to have a fantastic team like that when especially when the men are lacking.
Yeah, I mean, that Indiana women's basketball team is so much fun to watch. They they play the game the right way, but they play it in such an entertaining fashion. I love to see the emotion that was on their faces that entire game from the tip to the final buzzer. I mean, Mackenzie Holmes was just on a mission last night against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Sydney Parrish showed up. Sarah Scalia showed up. Everybody on that Team Yarn Gear zone was absolutely incredible. Yeah, that was incredible for Indiana, and there's going to be a lot more victories to come for the Hoosiers. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, we're going to keep doing it alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano. I'm Hayden Smith, hanging up the phone on this episode of TCP. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.